This is Jay Michaels from Terror TV, and I am talking terror with Bill Oberst Jr., who you might recognize from Three from Hell and a cavalcade of other genre films. But we're going to talk to him about his varied career that includes some amazing stage roles, includes one-person shows, and includes an amazing time on Criminal Minds that became one of their biggest ratings. So we have a celebrity with us, and I can't wait to chat with him. So let's get right to it. Bill, welcome to Terror TV. How's everything?
Jay, thank you. And I'm glad that you used the word terror because I think Karloff preferred that. He often said that it should be called terror, not horror. Right. And I feel the same way because it's not about revulsion. It's about that creeping feeling that something is happening which you can't control, which is a good metaphor for life, right?
Yep. Oh, well, nowadays especially. I even like the word fright. I'll use the word macabre or fright or things like that because every definition talks about a horror movie is meant to frighten you.
Oh, I like that. I like macabre very much too. That gets into tinges of the kind of ushery Poe melancholy, which for me is a huge part of horror too. Nice.
There's a whole execution in terms of being a genre actor, in terms of being a fright film actor. Of manipulating the audience in some way, using the element of fright within your dialogue. There's always that one moment in every horror movie where someone goes, "What? The door is unlocked," and suddenly we're supposed to be terrified. So it's really marvelous. Let's go backwards and talk about you being a cult favorite amongst aficionados of fright films. How did you get into the dark arts?
Oh, I love your phrasing. Have you written a book? You've written a book?
I'm writing one actually now, which is interesting you say that. Yes, I'm writing a textbook and I'm writing essentially a thesis, if you will, on horror movies.
Oh, I would love to read that. I really like your phrasing. I love words, and I got into the business and into the art through words. I was a pretty weird, lonely kid. Just about every horror fan will tell you the same thing, right? And we're all misfits. And I retreated into reading. My first exposure was to Ray Bradbury. And then I learned that there was somebody named Poe that Bradbury liked. And so I started reading Poe, and I was just amazed. And I fell in love with words. And that led me to want to do theater. And I did theater for 14 years. And then fell into doing movies and was delighted to find that I had a face fit for horror, a genre that I loved. And now I lobby for less words, Jay. Less words, because the guys that I play, the less words, the less they say, the better, the more they feel. And so when you have a really good intuitive horror director, you can say, can we take this paragraph and can we make it a sentence? And when you have a genius horror director, you can say, can we just say the whole thing with a look?
That's very interesting. You quoted Boris Karloff not long ago, and yes, he was the one that said it should be terror and not horror. His exact quote was something like, "I'm not out to horrify anyone." So I rather like your notion of words, of enjoying words. You've done a lot of solo work in your theater. You've done a lot of one-person shows. Is that because you were a solitary kid and so you enjoy that, or do you just enjoy the one-person show motif?
It's because I'm afraid of people. I am. I'm terrified of people. The child in me still says you're going to make fun of me. And so I don't do much socially outside of my work. And that's why I gravitated. The sports that I like, swimming and boxing, are solo sports. The outdoor activity that I like, wilderness camping, is completely silent and solo in the woods. You know, I don't, so the only team activity that I have is being on set, and it's really nice. But that's why I liked solo theater. Yes, I also like solo theater because it's terrifying. And there's no chance for a do-over. And to do something that's that scary and that fraught with danger is exhilarating.
Wow, that's See, now there's interesting. You're afraid of people. You're afraid. We're getting a lot of afraid, but you're jumping into these things that are terrifying.
Yes, but I'm always in control in the things that I'm jumping into. I am the person on stage, and if I fail, it's me failing. And also, I'm serving the audience. That's very important to me. It has been since I was a kid. I've always self-identified as a servant. I've always wanted to help people. My question is always, how can I help? But when you retreat into yourself and yet you still want to help, you have to find ways to do. So my way to help, sort of a ministry, I guess a frightful ministry, is used to be stage, and now it's doing films. I really do want to help people feel things that our culture doesn't encourage them to feel.
You bring up a really good point. One of your one-person shows was as President Kennedy, as John Kennedy. And there's a quote from someone in the audience who visited your performance, and she apparently worked with President Kennedy and said your performance essentially allowed her to grieve for the first time at that point in 30 years.
Yeah, it was about 97, 98. She was in the secretarial pool, and Kennedy chose her, and we can guess why, because I'm sure she was a looker in her day. But he liked her to sort of get his hair ready before the press conference. They had this sort of primitive form of hair gel, which they had for him. And she said she vividly remembered the feeling of smoothing down his hair. And he was always very quiet, very kind to her. And she said it reminded her of brushing her child's hair. It was a very intimate moment with this powerful man. And his death struck her so much that she hadn't grieved in 30 years. And yeah, she came up crying after the show.
Wow.
So it's a cathartic business when it works.
So you're succeeding. You're talking about trying to help people. Well, there you go. Your performance helped there. You played Jesus. That's a little different from a horror film.
Yeah, but he certainly dealt with horror in his life. Some of my favorite Jesus stories are the stories of the exorcisms, because there's the same thing that made The Exorcist a great book and a movie. There's strong evil and strong good, and they're meeting face to face. He actually has interactions with demons in these stories. You know, what's your name? Which is today a part of the exorcism, right? I demand, in the name of Jesus, you tell me your name. And the demon will say, what have you come to torture me before the time? Very, very dramatic, besides the love that he exemplified.
Of course.
Yeah, he definitely dealt with some dark stuff. Wow,
that's interesting that you took it from that angle. You share that credit, if you will, with Bela Lugosi. One of his first stage roles was also as Jesus. I don't know how he created the character, but I think yours is rather phenomenal in its approach to look at it in that sense. He battled the monsters.
It's very interesting, Jay. You can't really play Jesus because people have their own conceptions. So the more you get out of the way, the better. Like the less you do, it's like Robert De Niro said, people say, what do you do on camera? And I tell them nothing, absolutely nothing. And there's something to that in film in general and stage in general, and especially when you're portraying a figure like Jesus, because everybody's going to bring to it their own preconceptions.
Right. They said that about Marlon Brando also. I'm trying to remember exactly who said it. It was another actor who met him and said it was like he walked off the street and just stepped on stage. He was just himself. You played another historic figure in a very interesting way. You played Abraham Lincoln in Lincoln versus the Zombies. Am I correct in the title?
Yeah, it's Abraham Lincoln versus Zombies. It was an asylum picture, and it's a complete fluke that I got to play Lincoln. I got a call. They had been filming for one day, and they had a 6'4" Lincoln. But something happened between the producers and the actor, and the gentleman was no longer a part of the production. So I get a call just before I go to bed pretty early, but before I went to bed, from David Latt, who's the co-founder of the asylum in LA. And he said, I want you to play Abraham Lincoln. And I said, I'm 5'9". And he said, you'll stand on a box. We'll get you some shoes. And I said, well, I haven't seen the script. He said, you can read it on the plane. And I said, well, okay, if you'll call my manager, then we'll do it. And so the next day I was at LAX flying to Savannah to play Abraham Lincoln for 2 weeks. And I walked onto set, and the the director, Richard Shinkman, is a wonderful man, was not pleased that he had lost his big Lincoln. And, you know, here I come, 5'9" on a good day. And he said, "You're the new Lincoln?" I said, "Yeah." And as I walked away, somebody, I'm not sure if it was him or somebody else, said, "God help us. God help us." It was wonderful. But I knew I'd never again get the opportunity to play Lincoln, and he's a boyhood hero of mine. So Shinkman was great because I said, "What do you want?" And I was saying, "Oh, please, God, don't want a caricature." And he met my dreams. He said, "I want the Lincoln on the penny as if he were fighting zombies. Everything the same, but there just happens to be zombies in his world." So he let me do it naturalistic. And I got to do the Gettysburg Address too.
That's great. Well, God was definitely on your side. You got great acclaim for playing Lincoln in that. You were one of the highlights of the movie. So God help us. Yeah, apparently he did. Of course, because you made the movie, which is amazing.
And I still have the shoes. The shoes they're called the Toto. They were rumored to be the shoes that Tom Cruise wore. And they lift you up. It's the angle of your foot, Jay, it's like this. It's so severe. I remember running after the zombies once, and she go, "Cut. Bill, why are you running like that?" I said, "Because only my toes are touching the ground. I don't know how women do this." But I still have them, and I used to wear them for red carpets just so I could tower over everybody, but they hurt too much, so I retired them.
That's great. I see online all the time, they have new ways, because I'm 5'9" also, so they have new ways of making you taller and whatever. I've kind of given up. I said, "Hey, you know what? Fine. 5'9", I'm very proud of it." Now, you mentioned Ray Bradbury. You're kind of giving thanks to him these days. You're working on another one-man show about Ray Bradbury, yes?
Yes. I spent 3.5 years working with the Bradbury estate to get a script that worked and to get an agreement and a license to portray him on stage in a show called Ray Bradbury Live Forever. And we did it in LA, we did it off Broadway, started to tour it, and then COVID happened. And so the rest of my shows this year are canceled, and we'll see what happens for next year. But it's been quite a journey because he also is a boyhood hero. And, you know, like Lincoln, I'm the least likely person in the world to play Ray Bradbury. I don't look like him, but I got tired of waiting for somebody to do it. And my whole business motto throughout my career has been, if no one will hire you, hire yourself. So that's what I did. I just said, you know what, to hell with it. I've talked to several really good actors who look a lot like Bradbury and said, you should do this, and nobody's doing it. So I'm going to give it a shot. And it's tremendously gratifying, again, because I love words. And Bradbury was a wordsmith. And he loved libraries, and he loved Poe. He loved Gothic horror. He loved many of the same things that you and I love.
You bring up an interesting point about playing historic figures. There's iconic imagery of them. You played Mark Twain. Did you also play Mark Twain?
I did play Twain, and that's easier because you can hide behind the prosthetics.
That's what I'm thinking. You know, if the bushy mustache and the wild hair, okay, that's Mark Twain. Even when you talk Ray Bradbury, the shock of white hair, the thick,
that's right,
almost that squint that he had.
So I decided to play him younger because I always like playing against type. When I did Jesus, I made him rough with oily hair and very swarthy, and he looked like he might not smell good because people in that culture would have appeared that way. So I play Ray at his thinnest point for obvious reasons, have some prosthetics. Right. But I play him when he was at the peak of his creative and cultural powers, sort of in the 1970s.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And you're way ahead of your time. We're going to talk about how you're way ahead of your time somewhere else, but you're way ahead of your time because this is how people are looking at Jesus these days. They're realizing it's the Middle East. Chances are he didn't have blue eyes and a nose job. So
that's right.
I think you're way ahead of your time. Speaking of way ahead of your time, you won great acclaim being a stalker in Take This Lollipop. Was that the name of it? And it was sort of like a dark homage to social media.
In the early days of internet privacy, this was 2012. So we weren't as aware as we are now of what we're sharing on social media and how. Genius director, Jason Zada. He's the one who created a Christmas app, which is still around, called Elf Yourself, where you place your family's photos on elves' heads.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
He's really, really creative. I just talked to him this week about possibly doing a follow-up to the Lollipop. So when we filmed this, I didn't know what I was looking at because it was a big secret. So I'm in Linda Vista Hospital in LA, where 1 million horror films and videos have been shot. And I'm staring at this old-fashioned computer monitor with blue taped over it. And I said, Jason, what am I looking at? And he said, I can't tell you, but go dark. Go dark. And he kept whispering that. I said, what am I looking at? And he said, go to the basement, go dark. And so that's what you see that character doing. And then when it finally came out and I ran the app on my own Facebook profile and saw this son of a bitch pawing through my pictures, I was horrified. Wow. Because he's so dark. And it worked well, because what he's looking at many times are innocuous images. I had a woman write me and she said, I'm very irritated. Why are you so obsessed with pictures of my obese cat? She said, every time I run the app on Facebook, those are the pictures you choose, or my fat cat. I said, that was funny. Kids, when that app was out, it got 100 million views in just a couple of months. I used to have kids in movie theaters in LA say, Mom, that's the man that stalked me on Facebook. Huh. So I said, no, it's okay, really.
It's all for fun.
Yeah, it's all for fun. Get away from him, honey, get away.
Yeah, really. Don't talk to that man again. Wow. That's quite forward thinking again, because today social media, you don't know who's listening anymore. We all have Alexa and Google and other such things that we can talk to in our homes. Yes. Who knows if they're talking back. You won a daytime Emmy. Was it for that project? Which project?
Take This Lollipop won an Emmy that year for new approaches in daytime entertainment, which is very strange, but it was wonderful. The recognition was wonderful. It won South by Southwest. It won a Webby. So yeah, it was in my manager's understated words when I called him up and said, hey, apparently it won the Emmy. He said, that's not unhelpful. That's his way of speaking. And indeed, it was not unhelpful.
Well, yeah. An Emmy winner? Okay, yeah, I wouldn't call that, yeah, that's a pretty helpful thing.
But you know, I like people like that who don't because this is a business of, I love you and everything's going to be wonderful and we're making the next Friday the 13th. So I trust people more when they're understated.
Well, that goes back to what you're saying about how less words, even your characterization when you're talking about Take This Lollipop. What was the only direction? Go dark.
And no words. That was the gift of it. No words. Completely a nonverbal performance.
Well, you have that mastery. I could see you in silent films even. You have that mastery where we can look at your face and there's a whole story going on there. Not every actor can do that. And as I was researching you and looking at imagery and whatever, I'm looking like, wow, okay, this guy knows the camera. This guy knows how to tell a story without opening his mouth. I think it's
Jay, thank you for that.
Oh,
because Lon Chaney is a strong hero of mine. Thanks to Forey Ackerman, I know, who the heck he was. And once I got old enough and the films became available, I was fascinated. I mean, yes, the acting style is more extreme than we would do today, but he understood the lens. Okay. And when I started doing film, I asked every old actor that I knew, and the older the better, what is your relationship with lens? And every one of them had a relationship. You're not just, I'm performing and the camera captures what I perform. You're performing for the lens and you're serving the frame. And so how do I serve this frame? Why am I in this frame? Robert Loggia, who danced with Tom Hanks on the piano in Big. I did a film with him just before he died where I played Satan and he played Apostle Peter. And I asked him, what is your relationship with lens? And he said, the camera is your father confessor. You must tell it everything. And that's true, because if you lie to it just a little bit, people don't know why, but they'll know that you're a phony. Even though they don't know why, they sense that it's not true.
That's great. That's great. And nowadays it's even more pungent. I I teach, and I have to teach acting students because obviously they're doing Zoom every day, auditions and whatnot. So they have to look at this little camera and treat it as a person. It has to be a human being. So
And that, yes, and that requires woundedness. If you have never been wounded, you can't project yourself out of yourself because you're just in your shell. If you've never been wounded, you don't have any cracks. Nothing can get out. So that's why I think you find such addictive behaviors and destructive behaviors among actors. And I'm no stranger to that myself. It's because that's part of what makes you able to extend yourself out, is that you got a lot of cracks.
That's really interesting. Do you think a lot of abuse that actors give to themselves, drugs, alcohol, whatever, is because they, whether they can't take the fact that they're wounded enough to be able to speak to a camera, or they hide their cracks and can't get it through, and they got to get it out somehow?
That's exactly right. So you have to strip yourself emotionally, sometimes physically, certainly in your eyes. You have to strip yourself of everything and put yourself out there. And that's not a good recipe for, it's not a good recipe for, oh, what do they call it? Your best life. Live your best life. I don't live my best life. I don't want to live my best life, but I want to live the life that I was intended to live because God gave me this soul, which has some darkness in it. That's the life that I want to live, not some cookie cutter, one size fits all. A young director named Adrian Corona did an art house horror film I'm in called Dis. We went down to Mexico and did it. People either love it or hate it. I love it. Very strange, non-linear. But Adrian told me, he's a very intense young man. And when he showed me the script, he said, I didn't write this because I think anyone will like it. In fact, I'm quite sure no one else will. I wrote it because I had to. And he said, some people write to get attention and some write to relieve tension. And I wrote to relieve tension. And I think you're that kind of actor, he said to me, which is why I'm bringing this to you. And I thought I would never have been able to put it in those words, but it's exactly right. I think it only works if you have to do it to relieve the tension in you.
Do you think it's harder playing to the camera than playing to an audience?
Oh, yes. Much. Yeah, much. Because when you're in front of an audience, you're on a date and you can perform for them. You have little tricks and you can see if they like the tricks. And if they like the tricks, then you can try a little something else. But if you're with the camera, the lens is silent and all encompassing. It will tell you what it likes, but it requires complete subservience to that lens.
That gave me a lot of pause. That's something to really think about. I was thinking, I've done a lot of stage work myself. I've started on stage into film, as many have, and you hear, even if the audience is just breathing, you hear their heartbeat, if you will, when you're on stage. But you have to almost create the heartbeat out of the camera.
Yes, and Michael Caine said it really well. The emotion is not always there from the other performer, whereas on stage, a lot of times you are drawing from the emotion of the audience or other performers.
Oh, sure.
So when it comes to, like, if we're doing a 2-shot and they've shot your side, maybe you're not there anymore, or maybe you are there, but you're way off here. Well, one, you're way off there, and two, I can see that you're done. You're wigged out. You don't have the emotion to give anymore. So I have to have the emotional. I've got to know you're there out of my periphery, but work the lens and have the emotional memory of what I would be feeling if you were giving me something.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I laughed. One of the first times I had to do an interview on camera, I told some joke. I don't remember what it was. I said something funny and I waited for the audience to laugh, but no one did. And even the crew, no one was going to laugh because it can be heard on the mic and whatever. And I was like, oh, did I do wrong or whatever? So that first time I could see, what do you call it? Baptism by fire in terms of,
That's right.
In terms of learning that the camera is a living, breathing organism.
I speak to young actors sometime about marketing, and They all want to know, like, you know, how do I make the camera love me? How do I make the camera love me? Um, don't listen for set applause, because a lot of times the whole set will erupt in applause. That's another form of being on a date. You listen to that hungry lover, the camera, and you'll know. How will you know? You'll just know. Sometimes you'll get something from the DP. It's just a little sound. It's like, just a little, and you know, you hit it. But when you've done it enough, then you'll know whether you hit it or not. And you'll be bold enough to say, as I just did on a shoot I did last month, I really wasn't getting it in a take, and they were ready to move on. And I said, can I have one more? And, you know, having that instinct to say, can I have one more? And then, you know, all right, I have not stripped. I haven't stripped yet. I haven't put myself out there. And now I have to, because this is my last shot. But you don't know any of that if your relationship is with other people on the set, or your cell phone, or your relationship has to be with this silent black hole of a lens.
That one little eye, that doll's eye.
Yeah.
That's great. That is really great. How do you, as an actor, in terms of, okay, now we get the notion that of the love that you must give to your friend, the camera eye. How do you create your roles? Now you have played. Now you talk about the darkness in you, so I can see that the way you spoke about your stage roles and things. How do you create your character? What's the process in terms of putting that character to life? Because you played varied. Your horror film, your genre film career is varied. It's fascinating. It goes from it's indie, but it goes from things like Three from Hell to Handy Dandy, all the way through to like you said, young artists, their first film. How do you create a character? How do you put that onto the lens?
Find the wound that the character has and inflict it upon yourself. For me personally, that's what I do. I don't give a damn about backstory or what they ate for breakfast, but I do need to know where they're hurt, because all of my characters are malevolent, but they have this undercurrent of melancholy. And if they don't have that undercurrent of melancholy, Jay, I'm putting it in there, because that's what every actor has, a thing they do that they do better than many other actors. And I don't kid myself that I'm a wonderful actor, that I do everything, but I have that one thing, the wounded monster. And if it's not there, I'm going to find ways to inject it. So that's what I want to know, is where you hurt. Who hurts you? To be almost a therapist to the character.
That's very good. The character's going through therapy. What was the wound in Devil's Junction, Handy Dandy's Revenge? Because I saw that, and it's on Terror TV, and you were brilliant. You were really I love puppet movies. I love that, because it creeped me out so much to see this inanimate object taking control. And you were having such a, I think that's the best way. I was sitting watching it and saying, this guy's having a blast. This guy's just enjoying himself. How did you sum it up, that character? What was the wound, if you will, in that character?
The kids grow up and they don't want to play anymore, which makes him creepy. Kids grow up, and there was this one little improvised scene that I think a piece of got in there, and where I said, you know, let me complain to the ventriloquist dummy about one of the kids who's I want to kill, or whatever it was. You know, he doesn't want to play. He doesn't want to play. And that's the hurt, is the kids grow up and suddenly he becomes silly and irrelevant. Whereas before he was really important to their lives. So almost like a paternal thing. That's very deep underneath that over the top character, but it's there. And the makeup suggested, and I love making him kind of like he's a doll himself, like he had his hair slicked back and his gloves. Yep. Because that's his retreat. That's what he identifies with. And he really does think he puts on a great show. And he loves the little puppet man with the camera. He loves all of this until the kids grow up. Why do they have to grow up, Jay? Why do they have to grow up? And many parents will ask that, but he takes it to the dark side.
That's great. I see that in so many different movies in so many different ways. They talk about that with the Frankenstein monster a great deal. There's there's an interesting, I have it somewhere in my collection, a thesis about Freddy Krueger being the #1 Halloween costume for kids, more like for several years running. And whereas we think, oh, sure, the glove, the hat, sure, but he was a child molester.
Yes.
He was a child molester, the #1 costume for kids. And you may have hit something on the head with that, you know, you don't want to grow up. It's like there's fun that disappears, and you don't want it to grow up.
That's pretty interesting. Bradbury writes about this in a couple of short stories. One about a person who's congenitally like a child. They grow inside, but they never grow outside, and they have to keep it a secret that they're grown. How interesting. It's like the dark side of Peter Pan. I wonder if when we're kids, of course we can't remember, but I wonder if we were afraid of adults. Did we look at them and think, I never want to be you? I wonder.
Well, that's J.M. Barrie's whole thing. You know, Peter Pan refuses to grow up. So it must come from somewhere. I don't think that, well, they always talk about man caves and toys that you have, that you buy that are actually electronics and whatever. So I think you're right. I think at some point we just don't want to be our parents. We don't want to grow up.
I wonder if our parents, you think our parents did not want to be their parents?
I know my father did not want to be, my father did not want to grow up. He was sadder when I went off to college and I stopped collecting comic books and monster magazines as Ernest. He was sadder than I was. So yeah, I think our parents don't want to grow up either. So
how interesting
about that. Now that brings up something really fascinating. I talk about this a lot. The horror film lately, in the last few years, has finally, I think, started to earn its respect. When The Shape of Water won the Academy Award, anything Jordan Peele does nowadays, and J.J. Abrams, there's so many things where and if you look at the movie Contagion, which is a blueprint for what we're going through right now, and it was also, I think, in 2012, the horror movie is a cautionary tale. The horror movie is real. We look at these things, and you're right, people try to grow up and say, oh, it's silly, it's stupid. No, it's not. It's like a Greek tragedy. If you look at what the Cyclops or the Medusa is doing, it's no different than the monster, the vampire, the zombie. Do you think horror films, that they are a cautionary tale? Do you think maybe we need to really look at them deeper?
Oh, I know they're cautionary tales. Yeah, absolutely. And it's different for each generation. Like the first Universal wave was all about the terrors of the world changing too quickly and man playing God. And in the 50s, yeah, every cycle. It's a really interesting cycle that we're in right now. And in the indie world, you know, we don't always have the money to, in the cult world, I like being a cult actor, but it means that you're dealing with lower budgets, so we can't always recreate those things. But that's the underlying idea. I wonder if there will be more horror about isolation after this is over. It's very interesting. I know that the people that I play, I always try to make them cautionary tales, because the tendency and the danger is to say, aha, that's the other. This evil person that I'm looking at is not like me, and all I have to do is run and hide from them. But what I want them to realize is that there is no difference between you and them. You are them. Right. There is no other. You're looking at a variation of yourself. And that's what I try so hard to do. I want people to squirm thinking, this is kind of like me.
I'm hearkening back to Handy Dandy just because it's fresh in my brain. And I actually thought that because I used to love the Howdy Doody and all the other shows of which it was sort of loosely foundation. And yeah, now that I'm thinking about how you describe the character, of course, what would have happened if all of these puppeteers did not grow up? If they stayed that way, what would they become? They would become your character. Really brilliant. So even in that sense, yes, there is a cautionary tale. What's a memorable moment for you? You've done so many indie films, and I think in terms of acting style, correct me if I'm wrong, the more money you have, the less talent you need to exude. I think when you have to, like you're mentioning about Lon Chaney, and it's fitting. Didn't you won the first Lon Chaney Award? Am I correct?
You are correct, and I cried. My monster kid inside cried. Most of the awards are packed up because, you know, you don't want to walk in and think, oh, look at my awards. But that one I keep out because it was deeply meaningful to me. They didn't tell me that I was going to get it. It was the first Lon Chaney Award, and there's Ron Chaney. And he gave me the award and said nice things about what I'd done in the genre. And I just clutched it to my chest because this is one of my childhood heroes. And it was extremely meaningful. Chaney, who said, my endeavor is to bring humanity to my monsters.
And you did. And you definitely do. I think it's really brilliant. You mentioned Forrest Ackerman. And I see famous monsters in the corner behind you. Did you meet Corey Ackerman? Did you get a chance to actually meet him?
No, Jeff Farley, who did my Bradbury prosthetics in LA, told me wonderful stories. He was 17 years old, and he just went and knocked on Forey's door and became a regular there at the Acker Mansion. So I never got to go to the original Acker Mansion, but when I got to LA and started working in LA, the first thing I wanted to do, 2007, was to go see Forey. And it was just a couple of years before he died. He was on oxygen, and he was in the last version of the Acker Mansion. So He was pretty weak. And, but he gave me a great gift. Everybody that was there could go through the house and look at what was left. He had Lugosi's cape, Lugosi's ring, Chaney's top hat from London After Midnight. But he said, you know, you like the magazine? I said, yes. I said, I was a weird kid. And he said, you're still weird. And to have Forey Ackerman tell me that I was weird was wonderful. It was a great moment. I'm glad I got to meet him before he passed on. God, you know, Jay, had he not introduced this whole generation to, because there was no VCR then, that was even before that. Right. I wouldn't have known what a Lon Chaney or a Bela Lugosi, and thanks to him, I fell in love and found my identity through monsters. He really gave a great gift to a lot of young people.
You answered my question about the magazine. Yeah, I felt the same way. I thought I was the only weird kid in the Bronx until I got Famous Monsters. And I said, wait a minute, they wouldn't publish this magazine just for me. I guess there are others out there. I met him briefly at the 1973 Famous Monsters convention in New York. He signed my little program and he just looked at me and went, there you go, and just handed it to me. And for me, I totally accepted it. What was I was like 9 or 10. And I just went, Forey Ackerman just did this to me. And it was See, a high point also.
You're always a fan if you love this genre. I go to the bookstore on Hollywood Boulevard where Sarah Karloff is signing. And she says, you do horror. And I say, yes. You know, this is the picture that I'd like signed. And she said, that's not a scary face. My father had a scary face. Your face is not scary. So she wrote, Bill, that is not a scary face. Sarah Karloff. P.S. It's a very nice face. And so I treasure that picture. Then I was at the Egyptian Theater and they're running The Black Cat for Bela Lugosi week. And Lugosi Jr. sits down next to me. And I was like, oh my God. And so we chatted a little bit. And then he had this humongous tub of popcorn and he spills it. And I was like, oh, I'll get that for you. You know, I'm going to be the servant to I'll be the, and so just before the movie started, he looked down, adopted his father's voice, and he said, I shall tell them you did it. And I was like, oh my God. So yeah, everybody that I know in this business who really loves it, we're all huge fanboys still, and fangirls.
I'm so glad you said that. I've met Lynn Lugosi, his daughter. I've never met Bela Jr. And he's always serious on every interview I've seen. So it's nice to know he has a great sense of humor as well.
He didn't crack a smile. It was very, very flat.
Okay, but at least he did the accent.
Shortly after that at the Egyptian, they ran Phantom with the newly discovered orchestral score done live. And so I saw Ron there beforehand and we chatted. And he said, I've got a surprise for after the show. So I've got to slip out during the screening. And so during the screening, he gets made up as his father, as the Phantom. And as the movie's concluding, the spotlight comes on, and there's Ron Chaney as his great grandfather, like this, holding up the mask in full cape. People went wild. And so he went out in the lobby, and everybody, of course, had to have their picture with him. And he was so delighted. You could just see the love on his face and the love on the faces of the people. It was just marvelous.
You're exemplifying a point that you brought up about not growing up, about did people ever want to grow up? We must grow up, but I guess we need to keep a door open somewhere so that when we go see the Black Cat, when we pick up a famous monster, when anything, even whatever sport, whatever hobby, you can revert back to childhood just for that little moment.
That's what Bradbury said, keep your sense of wonder and you will grow older but never old. It's that sense of wonder and fun. I think horror doesn't have to be comic, but there should be underneath it a spirit of, hey, we're all going to die. And so for the moment, we're thumbing our nose at death. Actors like Christopher Lee and Vincent Price, for me, always had that. And that gave extra spark to the performance.
Vincent Price, I always thought, had the best time doing all this because he was a wonderful actor. He was a Shakespearean actor. He was a matinee idol and all of that. But even he loves playing the heavy. He loved playing the overdone character. Christopher Lee, not so much. Christopher Lee wanted a little bit more reality into his characters, but Vincent Price had the absolute best time.
Christopher Lee's relationship to the roles he plays reminded me of Robert Reed's relationships to playing the father on the Brady Bunch. They did it really, really well, but they were both a little pissed off that it wasn't more realistic.
Yep. Christopher Lee tried so many times. He did a show called a film called In Search of Dracula. He did another one which was a movie more faithful to Bram Stoker's novel called Count Dracula. He tried so hard, but like The Godfather, they keep pulling him back.
Yes.
He finally won in the last Dracula movie. He finally got to quote Bram Stoker's novel somewhere in there. He had this line about "my revenge is for centuries" or something, and he finally got to say it. It was like his happiest moment since 1958. So,
well, the connection to Gothic literature with horror, many young horror fans don't know of it. And so I've got a podcast called Gothic Goodnight that I started during the pandemic, and it's short selections of Gothic fiction for bedtime, about 20 minutes to put people to sleep with Poe and Hawthorne and people like that. But I've had a lot of younger people who've listened, who've contacted me and are like, wow, where can I get more of this? It's like the library. It's all free.
That's gorgeous. What's the website address? How can we go to it?
Just look up Gothic Goodnight on any podcast app. And I, again, having fun as a kid because I loved, the sort of creepy and eerie and all the horror comics. So I created this character for myself called the Old Library Keeper. And we're in an ancient library on the edge of a precipice, on the edge of a hill, on the edge of a forest, on the edge of a world. And the moon is just rising through the east window. And then he takes out a volume and he reads to you until you go to sleep. And ends by saying, remember, it's always midnight somewhere. And in someone's soul. Good night. And then I put some hiss behind it so it sounds analog. So it's as if you're listening to an older record that's going as you go to sleep.
Gosh.
I try to have fun.
Well, again, you're exemplifying being a kid again, and also your love of words. That's a great beginning right there. And just to give us the words, I think talk about service again. You're really doing your mission. How many of us have never read Dracula but have seen countless Dracula movies? How many of us have heard of Edgar Allan Poe but have never even cracked open The Raven or Annabelle?
That's right. And they're difficult, right? I mean, they're not always accessible because this is 19th century literature. And so you have to work, and a lot of times, I just did an episode based on Phantom, Gaston Leroux. It's not a great novel. You have to go through to pull out the gems, but the gems are in there. Okay. That's why I like doing art house horror and the kind of cult films that my heart is really in, which usually get ones on IMDb from people who say, I didn't understand it, because you have to work. You have to work. I like myself as an audience member and as a consumer of horror, I like to have to work and think a little bit. And so I tend to go toward those type of things myself.
I love indie for that reason. There's an underlying message. There's something in there. No, they don't have the CGI to give you, so they have to give it to you in text, in acting, and it's so much more of a pleasure to watch that kind of movie, because yeah, you got to work. If I don't want to just sit in the movie theater and eat popcorn, I want to work when I go see the film. And indie.
Yeah, because I mean, what you're trying for, you talk about fear. That to me, the white elephant in the room of life is death. Nobody talks about it, but with horror, well, again, not to overquote Ray, you can't overquote Ray. Bradbury said, death is a hole in the back of your mouth where there used to be a tooth, and you just can't resist running your tongue back there and feeling where the tooth used to be. He said, that's what death is. It's an absence, and you're always feeling for it. And that's what we have the opportunity to do with horror, is to feel around for that tooth and to tell other people it's okay. It's okay to feel around for it and think about it. What will it be like? Will I be afraid? What happens afterwards? You know, all of these questions we have about death that society says, no, let's not talk about that. We talk about them.
All the time. My favorite quote actually is Tom Stoppard. He said, death is the endless time of never coming back. And,
say that again.
The endless time of never coming back.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And
that's good.
When I first heard it, I smiled at that, because I thought, yeah, that's to we the living, that's what it is. Whatever it was is gone. And so we have to face its goneness, if you will.
Yes, it's gonedness, and they won't caredness. No matter what we do or what we leave behind, ultimately, they won't care. Even if we're Abraham Lincoln, we'll become a caricature in a music video, or we'll be put in an ad to sell things for President's Day, and our mouth will be made to say, it's a sale. No matter how long we live or what we try to do, we will be forgotten, trivialized, marginalized, and obliterated. That's hard.
That's great. That's something I need to think about. Ooh, you're so smart. I'm flattering you, and I know you don't like flattery, but I can't help it, because I feel like I'm in a master class right now, so it's absolutely wonderful. You did Criminal Minds. You did the TV show, and bringing it up is because you were one of their leading killers, one of their leading characters.
One of three that was never caught.
And it was more than one episode? You were in several episodes?
Yeah, and the character was never brought back because fans were divided on it. Some people really liked it, but some Criminal Minds fans said this is too dark. And it's because Matthew Gray Gubler, who created that character and directed the episodes, he's a horror fan. He's one of us. And that's what he wanted to do, was create a horror homage. And that's what we did. The character's look was an homage to Chaney, and he wanted it very gentle and childlike. And so, yeah, a contingent of Criminal Minds fans thought, this is too creepy. We like standard serial killers. He's too sympathetic.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So it's sort of like they weren't ready. That was an audience that wasn't ready to work.
No. Oh, no. They're right, because Breen Fraser, the producer on the show, that's one other item I keep out, the Criminal Minds. He wrote on one of the scripts, thanks for giving us the most heartbreaking serial killer we've ever had on the show. And that's what some people weren't. I'm not saying that. I don't mean to say, Jay, that they, they weren't ready for my. I just mean that some people prefer not to feel any sort of humanity for a serial killer, because the fun for them is saying that bastard needs to be caught. But, here's Adrienne Barbeau playing my mother, and she's crying real tears, take after take, because she gave me up for adoption after this affair she had when she was a teenager. And I'm saying, when I was a baby, did you even hold me? And she's crying, and she says, no. And I say, you never even thought about me, did you? Got these big tooth plumpers in. And Adrienne says, I tried to forget you, but I knew one day I'd have to pay for my sins. And my character stands up and kisses her and says, you were right. To me, that's the essence of horror, because it's it's all drawn in and a horrible thing is about to happen, but we can all relate to it because we all have mothers and regrets. But some people didn't like it.
I think an audience needs to be vulnerable also. You talk about the actor needing to be wounded, needing to open up their wound to perform. I think an audience needs to open up their wound also. When they watch something, do they want something that will just please their mind for a little while, you know, after dinner or whatever? What do they really want to think? So I guess sometimes an audience is not ready to go that far in terms of thinking.
That's right. And if there are people who really don't ever want to go that far, you'll never make them like the type of work that we're talking about. It'll always be niche, which is why I'm a cult actor, because I like stuff that's not widely, the best stuff that I think I've been involved in is not for the casual viewer. And my God, if you tell a producer, hey, I'm working on a project that's difficult to watch, disturbing, and not for the casual viewer, they're going to think, why?
Because that's what's important, because that's the medicine. That's the moment. What is...
You just said that's the medicine.
Yes.
You got to remember that, Jay. That's strong. I'm going to remember that, and I might steal it from you. No, I'll attribute it, but I'll use it. That's strong. That's good.
Please quote me. Dear diary, Bill Oberst Jr. is going to quote me. There you go. That's my Cheney Award for now.
That's the medicine. Amen.
It is, because, like I said, we walk away from a film, and we need to be able to learn something and have a catharsis from it. And if we just say, "Oh, that was funny. Okay, what's next on TV?" Then something went wrong. What's a memorable thing for you within your career? I'm not going to say, "Oh, the best film" or whatever. That's subjective. Stan Lee, when asked who's his favorite Marvel character, he used to say the one I'm working on right now. So I don't ask the best, but what was that one moment where it was an aha moment for you, a great moment of galvanizing, anything like that? What was that one moment that sticks with you?
An aha moment. It was very early, and I was just starting to get a lot of horror films. I had previously, my manager at the time was sending me out for soccer dad roles with my hair all done up. And as one of the casting directors told me kindly, he said, "You look like the soccer dad that's going to kill the team and eat them." So that wasn't happening. But I started working hard. And so I thought, okay, I need to be mean. I've got to be angry. So I was contorting my face and wanting to shout these lines that I was given to say. And I had a really, really good director early on who pulled me to the side away from the crew and said, "Don't shout. Don't shout on my set, and don't shout on anybody else's set ever again. It's not your strength." And I said, "What do I do?" And he said, "Be gentle. Be oh so gentle. Be oh so gentle. That's it." And he said, "Your face will do the rest. Your face has enough menace, and you have enough menace within you that you don't need it." And so that's where I started doing quiet delivery. Then I had just a quick amendment to that, a film called The Retrieval, which was not horror. It was a Civil War piece. Director named Chris Eska. Beautiful film, The Retrieval. I'd encourage people to see it. And Chris wanted us to be completely still in the frame, like this, so that only our mouth moved and nothing else. And it was really hard for me. And I remember Chris coming up, we were doing a campfire scene, and he said, "What piece of wood do I need to hit you with to get you to be still in the frame?" But finally, he taught me. So these two directors, one taught me to be quiet and one taught me to be still. And those are things which, when I can remember to do them, are very effective.
You've obviously mastered that part completely. So other than Bradbury, anything new once the doors open? Anything new over the horizon?
Yeah, filming has resumed. And I've done 2 shoots last month, and I've got 2 more before the end of the year. I think theater is going to be a while until there's a vaccine. I got the good night. Again, hiring yourself, create the damn podcast, then contact Audible and say, "Hey, I'd like to turn this into an Audible exclusive." And Audible said yes. So I have a contract with them to put some additional material with these 13 episodes that I've done and turn that into an Audible exclusive called A Gothic Goodnight Companion. And that'll be a book as well as an audio book. So yeah, I'm always hiring myself, Jay.
You're not the first person to say this. Whenever I speak to any indie artist, they always say the same thing. I get tired of waiting. I got tired of doing what other people wanted to do. So even on that, you're a forward thinker, and a brilliant one at that. Bill, it has been a pleasure to speak to you. I wasn't kidding. This has been a masterclass for me. There are things I'm taking away from this that I'm going to use forever. And it is an honor to speak to you. It's just an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to so much more. And tonight I'm tuning into Gothic Goodnight, and something.
Oh, good.
It's not going to put me to sleep.
Yes, it will. It's made to. I guarantee you. I test every episode. I take it to bed with me, and if it doesn't put me to sleep, I know I haven't done my job. But you must listen at night, Jay. Please don't listen in the daytime, because it's meant for bedtime.
Well, I think I'm going to have two conflicting Billisms here, because I'm going to listen to it and you think I'm going to fall asleep, but I'm just going to sit and revert to fanboy and just say, I spoke to Bill Oberst today. This is him doing classic work. So let's see which wins. My fanboy needs to sleep.
You let me know. And this has been a pleasure. And when we do it again, I want to interview you, because your book will be out by then.
That would be nice. That would be very nice. You're making me blush. Thank you very much, Bill. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jay.
And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of all the ghosties and ghoulies and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night, this is Jay Michaels talking terror with Bill Oberst Jr. on Terror TV. And if you have trouble sleeping, you know where you need to go. Thanks.